Hi guys, today we're going to be chatting about emergency funds, but specifically my emergency fund, as in how much I plan to save and how exactly I'm going to get there. So emergency funds are typically 3 to 6 months of living expenses, but it has been shown that even if you just have a month worth of living expenses, that goes very far. So if you're short on cash or can only save 1 month, then do that. Like the 1 month is better than no month save. So when I think about emergency funds, essentially what I'm thinking about is if I were to lose my job today, like how long would it take me to get another job? And that is one of the factors that I think about when I'm determining the length of the emergency fund. And then of course you also want a little bit of extra money for things that may come up. So it's kind of a dual purpose thing, the emergency fund. So how long is going to take you to get another job, and how much would a typical emergency cost you? Once you've thought of those things, then the other thing is to find out what exactly are your living expenses, and those are typically things like housing, internet, your phone, transportation, utilities, food, and debt payments. So things that you're obligated and absolutely need to have on a monthly basis, that is what you use to determine your emergency fund. So you don't need to be saving for things like sinking funds, subscriptions, and other frivolous things that you can easily do without. You only need to save enough to survive, essentially. And of course, that amount should be readily accessible. I mean, that's the whole point. It's for emergencies. So if you need something quickly, so that means it needs to be in a bank account as cash. So preferably a high yield savings account or a high yield checking account if you can manage to find one. There are several that are around nowadays, so it shouldn't be hard to find. Most of them are online because those banks have less overhead, so they can afford to give us a higher interest rate. So that's where I would look first. Of course, you don't want to be putting your money into a stock or stocks in general or any investment that can lose money, because even though the stock market effectively goes up over time, there are times when it doesn't. So you don't want to have to pull money out of the stock market when it's in the downturn, because that effectively locks in your losses. So it's best to just avoid that entirely and keep it in a savings account, something liquid that you can readily get. Now, the other alternative to a savings account is a I bond issued by the US government. However, those are not necessarily as liquid as, say, your checking account or your savings account, because any money that you put into the bond is not available for withdrawal for 1 year. So that's 1 year you cannot access the money. So this only works if you have extra money that's available in a bank account. So that extra money needs to be enough to cover some degree of emergencies. Perhaps it's not your entire, if you had a year's worth of emergency fund, it'd be best to put away at least half of it outside of that. So half can be in I bonds and then half can be in regular bank account. But you cannot have your entire emergency fund initially, at least, in an I bond, because you can't access it for a year. Now, once the year is up, then you can access it. There is a 3-month interest deduction if you withdraw money from it, but that's not usually a huge deal because that's not your actual principal. That's not your actual money that you put in yourself. It's just interest that the government has given you. So there's that. And while I bonds are an option, they're probably not the best option for everyone. So I don't necessarily recommend you do that as your first choice, especially if you're just not getting into finances and figuring out that you need an emergency fund and are saving for it. It's best to leave that when you're a little bit more financially secure. Then you can dabble in that if you so choose. But I want you guys to know about all the options, because that's the whole point of this channel, is to give you guys information that might be useful. So yes, those are your 2 options for saving in a emergency fund. Now, to find out what your monthly expenses are, I mean, it sounds obvious why they're monthly expenses, but there are some expenses that I'm sure other people have as well that are not monthly, and you also need to factor those in. So how I go about doing this is looking back 1 year ago at the amount of money that I spend. And of course, if you signed up for something new this year, then you need to account for that too. But you can do that by looking back at your bank statements, checking account most likely, and then credit card statements as well. I use Mint that aggregates all your data over the years, so that's what I use to like go back and like look at my expenses. Once you have your expenses together, then you can use that amount to determine how many months you want to save for. And of course, if you have something like an annual bill, you need to divide that number by 12. And if you have a bi-yearly bill, so a bill that comes around every 6 months, what I do is I multiply that by 2 so that I have 12 months worth, and I just divide that again by 12. So that's what I do to like figure out monthly amounts for like irregular payments. Now, in terms of saving for emergency funds, it helps to have a budget or to know how much money you bring in, what your expenses are clearly, which we just went over, and then how much money you're going to have left over for the month. Once I do that, then I sometimes set that amount of money to automatically come out of my account and into that emergency fund. But because I'm trying to go a little harder than usual, like I will just go month by month to see what I have left over and put that full amount into the emergency fund. So that's an option as well. If you have an issue like being that dedicated, then I find that automating the transfers is the best way because you don't have to think about it. It's like you know how much you don't need every month and that money goes away, and then you don't have to, you know, be tempted to use it. That's why it's important to put it in one of the high yield savings account that's like separate from your regular banking so that you're not tempted to like use it. Now, if you want to save a lot of money quickly, then you're probably going to have to like cut back on things that aren't a necessity. So that's what I'm doing. I think I mentioned it in a few of my videos that I'm going to be cutting back on excessive shopping, anything that isn't necessary, because I want to get this funded as quickly as possible. In fact, I'm thinking about, or I'm hoping to fund this by the end of the year. So I have 3 months to do this. Now, let me mention this quickly because saying I only have 3 months for $20,000, that's would not be feasible in my case. But I already have $10,000 of my emergency fund already saved, so I only need another $10,000. So that isn't exactly easy either, having $10,000 in 3 months, but it's a little bit more feasible because I should have some extra money coming my way. So we'll see how everything works out, but I will keep you guys abreast, of course, of what I'm doing and where I'm at with the emergency fund, at least until it's fully funded. Now, for last month, which was September, I did manage to save some money. So I put away $1,000 once I went through my finances, and that I deposited into the high yield savings account. And then I made about $1.93 in interest already. So I have $1,001.93 in my half of emergency fund. So effectively, I have $11,000 saved for my emergency fund so far. So stay tuned through the rest of the year to see how much I'm able to save. I'll keep you guys updated every month like I mentioned, and until then, I'll see you guys in the next video.